My favorite all-time question, and it's kind of the go-to question I always go at the end of the interview, is assuming you join our team tomorrow, how do you make us better?
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi Tech and sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Turing, Upwest Labs, and Hillel at Stanford. This one is really all about leadership. Welcome Arnon Kraft, the CEO of Big Four Strategic Consulting and former general manager of Microsoft. Arnon is a business and operations executive with over 20 years of general manager and vice president level experience from Fortune 500 companies like Microsoft and SanDisk and startups. Until 2018, he was with Microsoft, managing a business scope of multi-billion US dollars and building strategic partnerships with the leading tech companies. In 2018, Arnon moved back to Israel, where he currently represents two leading technology MNCs from Asia as their strategic advisor and technology scout. In addition, Arnon brings his extensive experience and serves as an active advisory board member for startup companies where he helps CEOs and COOs to scale up their growing companies. Arnon Kraft, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Good. How are you, Michael? Good to be here.
It's now everything is fantastic. I'm excited to talk about your journey. You've had a phenomenal journey. Obviously, looking back, it looks very, very linear. But as I've learned in the show, a lot of decision-making experiences are not that obvious, and I can't wait to pick your brain about some of the difficult decisions that you had to make, some of the career development insights that you've harnessed over your career, which has been incredible. Through the Technion and Tel Aviv University to NES, SanDisk, Modu Mobile, and Microsoft as general manager. Leading multi-billion dollars, in business and in partnerships. So obviously you've seen a lot, you've done a lot, and one of your fantastic talks on TEDx that I had a pleasure of seeing talks about this idea of career development and this how to make the most of your first 90 days. And so before we get to that, Arnon, tell me a little bit about your background and what sort of led you throughout your career until now.
So my background is I have an engineering degree and then an MBA. My engineering degree from the Technion and then MBA from Tel Aviv University. And I've actually had, I would say, two very different careers. The first one was with IT or information systems, and I spent a few years, actually almost 7 years in the Israeli Navy, working on information systems, and then, as you mentioned, in a company called NES. And then my second career, which has been for the past 20 years, has been with consumer electronics companies. And I've done various roles in each of these different careers, but it's really about, I think, seizing the right opportunity when it comes along. And part of that, and part of making sure you have those opportunities or that they present themselves, is really the network of people that you have. And I would even call it just friends and people that you're friends with, because, I think about it, at the end of the day, all of the great opportunities I've had, and I was lucky to have had them, was because I had, a friend who knew me and thought highly of me and thought I could add value to a certain company. And that's how I was presented with these opportunities.
And so how have you seen it actually play out in these experiences? You're mentioning that at the end, it's the network that you bring with you, not just the LinkedIn network, but it's actually the people that are close to you, your inner circle, that are the ones that are presenting these unique opportunities. What I'm hearing, between the lines, that it's a lot about trust, right? It's a lot about this trust that you build that at the end transcends into these new opportunities. So how does it actually play out?
It's exactly about trust, and it's about a certain credibility that you have with people. And again, you can't, be friends with everybody, and to be honest, you shouldn't probably. And you can't have the same level of credibility with everybody, and vice versa. But it's, again, along the way, whether it's through your personal life or work life, you meet people. And again, as an example, I was selling SAP systems in Israel. This was my last role as in the IT business, and I get a call from a very close friend who was with me in the Navy actually, and he said, "Look, I'm now the GM of this business unit, and we need a head of product marketing and management, and you'll be a great fit." And I told him, "How do you think? I don't have any experience in product marketing or management. I've never done consumer electronics. I've never worked in a global environment before. So pretty much anything that I can think is needed for this position, I don't have." And he said, "Yep, but I know you and you'll do great." And I admit it took me a couple of days to think about it. But at the end of the day, again, when you have somebody who believes in you, these are the breaks you need. And that was definitely built on our working together, in this case in the Navy, for 7 years and getting to know each other very, very well. So it's definitely about building that trust with people along the way. And it doesn't have to be necessarily friends, it could be partners and suppliers and customers. Um, I can give you a second example. I was working as a VP for operations for Modu, which was a startup company here in Israel. And we set out to build the world's smallest and lightest mobile phone, and we did. For various reasons, the company did not end up being a success. And as I was, looking through what I want to do next, I got a call from Microsoft all the way from Redmond, really halfway across the world. And part of the reason is they heard about me from some of our partners that I had in Modu that Microsoft is also working with. And they told them, "Look, this guy just became available. You should talk to him." And again, that's another example of partners and suppliers who you had a good
Right.
relationship with, and eventually these things come back to you.
100%. So, I love how we're framing this conversation about, the different values that one should keep in mind as they go through their journey. Because one of the things that I'm saying, and I have the great pleasure of wearing a few hats throughout the past year or so, which is both as a student at Stanford with a lot of other hungry, scrappy students that are thinking about what to do. But I'm also in Hippo Insurance, and I get to see internally within an organization how it runs and how people progress and how you build an incredible company, but also from an investor's perspective, how do you invest in companies that at the different stages, and how do they keep focused and build a great culture. So framing this about the personal development, I'm seeing a lot of rush. I'm seeing a lot of competitiveness. I'm seeing a lot of people that are joining companies as a stepping stone. They're not really thinking about what they're tangibly doing, but what's going to get me to the next phase. So I'd love to pick your brain on some other values that one should keep in mind as they harness a new talent or join a new organization or try to make that leap in their career.
So a couple of things. One of the things that really opened my eyes, and I have to admit, in being with Microsoft as a GM, and I was there for 7 years, it's really incredible to see, and especially after Satya took over as a CEO, and that shift in corporate culture for a ship that has 120,000 people, and still it was so evident and clear to feel that change within less than a year. One of the things that was amazing, and I know people tell me, "Oh, this is a luxury that a big company can have," maybe. But when we had an opening and we hired somebody, even if it was a very urgent, job opening that we needed to get somebody in the door, the way we would look at this, and this really kind of changed my view on hiring. We would look if somebody, can they be a good hire for Microsoft, not just for this role, for Microsoft for the next 10 years? Are they going to be the right fit for our culture? And I have to admit, in some cases, we found somebody we thought is the perfect candidate to come in and plug the hole that we had, but we also didn't think it's the right person to have join the company, and that does not fit the culture that we want to see. And we said no, and we moved on. And yes, I admit, when you're a startup company, you have 20 people, you need somebody to come in and do X or Y. You don't always have that luxury. I completely get that. But I think the more you can at least have those conversations, and I can tell you today, I'm on the advisory board of a few startups here in Israel. One of them is going through exactly that same process today. We saw a candidate. He's technically the person that we need. We don't know if it's the right fit, and we're having those discussions. And for me, I'm just happy that the CEO and CTO, the co-founders, are having those discussions. And I think that shows a great deal of maturity and care about the type of company that they want to build.
Right. And so tell me a little bit about how do you actually, break down that barrier? Because it's very easy to give, assessments that, we have data from, thousands of candidates that, if the candidate performs in the top 5% of this assessment, then they would probably be a good technological or skill set wise fit for your culture or for your company, but not for necessarily for the culture, which is much more fluffy, right? It's much more subjective. There's no one way to test this. So how do you advise, even young founders that are looking to make their hires, how do you even go about assessing whether this person is the right fit or not?
I'll be honest and say I don't have a ready-made answer or process. Right. Do this, do these steps, and you're good to go. To some extent, it's so much easier to hire based on hard skills and technical skills than it is based on soft skills. There's a famous, I'm sure everybody heard about it, the famous beer test. Is this a person that you want to go out for a beer with?
Right.
I don't like that test because it actually allows for our bias to only hire people we want to have as friends, and that's not the intent. And as managers,
Interesting.
It's not about hiring friends, it's about hiring people who are good for the company. So I would stay away from that. But I can tell you what we did at Microsoft and at SanDisk as well. We would have 6, 7 people in an interview loop, and we would write our comments again, not just on the technical skills, but mainly on the soft skills, or not mainly, but my job was at least to mainly look at the soft skills and talk to people about challenges that they have, and talk to people about. I admit all these cliches that you can read on websites, the questions that people ask you, and sometimes we ask harder questions. My favorite all-time question, and it's kind of the go-to question I always go at the end of the interview, is assuming you join our team tomorrow, how do you make us better? And people would tell me, I don't know what your team needs or what gaps they have, and to me that didn't matter. I used to give them, this is a few years ago now, I used to give them the J.J. Watt example. He was at the time the best defensive player in the NFL, and I will tell them, you know what, it doesn't matter which team you put J.J. Watt on, he's going to make them better defensively just because of who he is. His superpower is playing defense. It doesn't matter, which you are. And that was my analogy. And when you join our team tomorrow, how do you make us better? What is your superpower? And many cases people would say, I need to think about it, which is fine, or it would just try to strike up a conversation. But it really led to very interesting replies and conversations with these people.
Right. And so, talking about culture, talking about, and the relationships and people starting out their careers, what are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing? So people that, either, join companies, start companies, but things that really you see repetitively and they say, okay, the next person should be worried of that.
So 2 things that come to mind. I think one, you mentioned it briefly. People look at companies as a stepping stone. I'm just going to do my 2 years stint here and move on to the next place.
Right.
Even worse, people actually are loud and open and tell people about it, which is just, I think, terrible. But even the thought process itself, I think you want your first job, or the first 10 years of your career, to be with a good company that you relate to the culture, and especially to have a great manager. And I get it, it's hard to assess if the manager is a good manager or not before you start, but I think that's what you need to look at. You want to have a great manager, right, that looks out for you, somebody you learn with, somebody that helps you grow, somebody that gives you the right opportunities within the company. And again, if it's a good company, and there's so much information today online, and talk to friends, just do your homework. If it's a company that you hear from people. It's a good company to work for, and it's a good manager. I think, you struck gold, and you should stay there as much as you can. I wouldn't worry when you start about what's my next move going to be, because honestly, I think most people really have no idea. I can again tell you from my perspective, I started my career in IT and sales, and my
Right.
last position at Microsoft was sourcing and partnerships. So I think you really have no idea. I think it's always a good thought and process, and it's a good plan to put a career plan in place, but especially keep an open mind and look out for these opportunities, because they will come along the way. And again, that plan is only something that you would want to change later anyway. So just be cognizant of that fact.
Right.
And I think the second thing that people seldom think about when they start a position in a new company, most people, whether it's sales or marketing or operations and sourcing or whatever it is, they look to the outside. If it's salespeople, when I was doing sales, people join a company, the next day they want to be on a plane, go see customers. And I would always ask them, why? What value can you possibly bring to your customer on your first week, second month on the job? Same with operations people. They want to go out and see the suppliers, and we ask them why. You don't even know what the gaps are. I think people overlook the extremely important process, which in most cases is a lot harder, of building internal partnerships. And whichever position you have people inside the company that you need to work with and partner with. And going back to what we said before about trust, if you don't know how to build that trust and credibility internally in the company to get to the point where you can make an influence and eventually make an impact, then you're useless. And you can have a great rapport with the customers or suppliers, but if you don't know how to do that internally, you'll have a hard time being successful.
Right. Now, I love those insights, and I think that these are things that I've been slowly, learning about myself, and about sort of the values that I want to bring towards, whatever I do, which is either, both with a passion, but also in terms of the culture, the relationships, and the right mindset to enter these partnerships. It's not just about ticking the check boxes, but it's about really learning through these experiences, making sure that you provide the right value both to yourself and to your manager. It's a two-way street, right? It's not just it's not one sided where one side is just pleasing the others, but it has to be a win-win situation for everybody. Arnon, your career is just phenomenal, and having had the opportunity to be management in sales and partnerships and operations and R&D, there's so many different things that I would want to ask you, but given that we just have a few minutes left, I have to ask you a little bit about the idea behind partnerships and growing scalable partnerships. You're advising companies on how to do this. What have you found as you're sitting, on the leadership of these fantastic companies like SanDisk and Microsoft and Nest? What does it take to build really meaningful partnerships?
It's actually a really powerful question. And I think one of the things I learned throughout my career is you can read all the negotiation books, and trust me, I have, and it's really easy to see, especially maybe I would see younger people in their careers today, when they come in to negotiate, you can kind of, after 10 minutes, understand which is their go-to book and what is their strategy. At the end of the day, this is going to sound like a terrible cliche, but it's really, really not. And I'll give you an example. It's really about building a partnership, as opposed to I'm going to get the most from that company and hopefully they won't from us. And it's really about, first of all, doing your homework. You need to understand what
Right.
the other side of the table they need as a company, and especially the person, the team, the people who are sitting across the table from you. What do they need? What do they need to come back to their headquarter with is going to be a success? And you'd be surprised, in many cases people don't even hide that. They'll be happy to have that conversation and say, look, this is what we need. And I'm not naive to think that people will always share everything. And again, I know how it works. But when you come in with that point of view and that approach, again, I was surprised of how much people love to play along, and understand how to do things. One of the first huge agreements I had with Microsoft was with a big partner in Japan. And I've known this company from my M-Step Systems and SanDisk days for many years. And it took us a year and a half to negotiate, and the teams went back and forth, and they could just not land on an agreement. Eventually, I met the GM of that company at CES. This was, I guess, 5-6 years ago. And we had 10 people or something like that from each side, and the teams are still going at it. Eventually, he says, stop. He takes me outside. We go out. Again, this is Vegas. We go out to the casino. He said, if you tell me, I know you for 12 years, if you tell me that I can trust you with the intent of what we wanted to get out of this agreement, even if we can't put it in writing, I'm good to go. And I looked at him, and again, I'll keep his name with me, and I told him, we're good to go. You can trust me. You know me. And he said, we're done. And we went back in, and we were done. And that agreement still holds today. And again, it's not because we're friends or because he liked me as a person, because he knew me and how I do business. And he knew that I care about him meeting his objectives. And that's important to me. And I'm going to make sure that that happens. Of course, my first priority, and that was on the table, is Microsoft, as it should be. But at the end of the day, if you care about the other side and want this to really be a partnership, again, I'm not naive. I'm the last person you can call naive, but it really works.
I love it. Arnon, thank you so much for your time and for the inspiration. I love the values that you bring to the table, both in terms of the career development, but also in terms of building the right partnerships. And at the end, it comes down to trust. It comes down to trust both with the other person that you're working with, partnering with, or trust with yourself of being honest about what your intentions are and being very transparent about those intentions with the people you work with and your manager, and making sure that those intentions are aligned, right? And I think that part of what I've been seeing is that sometimes these intentions are not aligned, and that's why hiring is hard, right? And people say hire slow, fire fast, particularly for those reasons. So Arnon, thank you for the time and inspiration. The most important question, 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Yeah, 19 minutes is not a long time. I would say that the first one is I'm a learner. I like to ask questions. I like to read. I like to listen. And really think about it. How many people that really like to listen and are actually good at it, and listen with the intent of actually listening and not just saying what you have to say? I think the second thing is determined. And I think that word really speaks about ambition, but it's more than that. It's about the relentless nature, I think I would say, of achieving your goals, and the discipline, especially the self-discipline that is required. And I think self-discipline is something that, and self-motivation is something that I've read tons of books about, and something that I think is extremely important. And the third word I would use is people. And I've had a conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago with somebody about, introverts and extroverts. And am I a type of a person who gets energized by people or needs energy to go be around people? And I think at the end of the day, most cases, more often than not, I would prefer to be around people and have a dynamic that involves people. Obviously, would love that to be my friends. It doesn't have to be. I like to make new friends, and I really think that doing what we do in working with teams of people and being around people is really what drives all these companies and the energy forward. And I think I look at all the companies I've been to, from M Systems, our culture was people first, to Microsoft, and it was the same. It's really about the people that are the most important asset that these companies have.
I love it. Arnon, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.